My name is Meena. I come from New Zealand. I work in Bank of New Zealand as a senior platform engineer. Now, the last day, and especially even in the morning session, there was a lot of conversation about how we encourage women to get into the management roles, right? And in New Zealand, we do see more women in management roles, and there are a lot of initiatives to encourage them to progress into management roles. But when you actually look into the technical teams, we see a lot more that can be done. There is severe underrepresentation of women in technical roles. And I transitioned into technology from data analytics, and it was a huge struggle for me to actually break in to a so-called club which was just dominated by men. And last year I was presenting a technical paper in a conference, and it was very intriguing where we had speakers dinner with a table predominantly occupied by men and with just a couple of women. So that's where I was like very, very intrigued by this, and I decided to actually do some work on it. And I approached certain organizations like women in tech organizations within New Zealand to see if they would be keen to support. But actually it all comes down to budget, and no one was ready or willing to actually invest time or effort. You can see a lot of conversations happening around this on podcast or like sessions, women in tech sessions, but no one is actually willing to go, talk, find out what's happening and come up with some practical solutions. So that's how this whole project started. Now, that's a trigger for the study. Now, what did I have in hand? I didn't have any resources in hand, and I just decided to carry on with this research all by myself. I didn't want to completely stop this work just because I didn't have the money. I decided, like, I have double masters as well, and I have thought, I had this confidence I can pull this through somehow with research and statistics background that I had. I decided, okay, I'm just going to do this and let's see what happens. So what I did was I conducted a survey where I designed the survey instrument, and I got in touch with women working in technology sector in New Zealand. And we had about 200, almost 200 participants completed this survey, and of that 187 were based in New Zealand. I got in buy-in from the CTO in Bank of New Zealand, who was quite supportive, and he encouraged this woman working in technology within BNZ to take part in the survey. And predominantly it was word of mouth. Like, it was like I would talk to some woman, and then the woman would carry forward and take it to her organization and stuff. And then the interviews were conducted between September and December last year. And when women started completing the surveys, they got in touch with me saying, hey, we wanted to share more of our stories, which we can't really capture in your questionnaire. So that's when I decided, okay, I'll send an invite out for an in-depth interview. Some of them didn't disclose their personal details. Of the people who disclosed their email addresses, I contacted them saying, hey, do you want to actually have a personal catch-up? And surprisingly, there were quite a few people who responded back saying, hey, we want to have that interviews. And then I conducted some Zoom interviews between December and Jan. And the more I got involved in it, the more intriguing it became. And then I decided, okay, now is the time to actually look at some research around behavioral sciences. And what is there? Like, how are women different to men? Are we actually expecting the same behavior, the same level of confidence that a man would display from a woman? Or should it be different? So I decided to also dig in and do some literature reviews. Now, on the benefit, like, we don't have much time, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to provide the summary of the findings. Now, the objectives. So the main objective is to understand the perspectives and experiences of women working in the tech industry, and also the potential barriers that they encounter working in the technology industry, and also understand from their perspective, are their organizations providing enough support to do this, right? And the main goal is to raise awareness and advocate this and propose solutions to organizations to see what changes they can make to enhance a better environment for women. So I decided to contact women working in technology sector in New Zealand, either as administrators, engineers, developers, business analysts, testers, product managers, delivery managers. And again, it was a non-probability sampling. Snowball sampling meant that I would contact someone and that person would take the message to someone else, right? And this is just a brief profile of people who took part in the survey. A lot of them had good amount of experience in the industry to share legitimate experiences they had. And a lot of them came from banking and finance, because I work in banking sector and my CTO really supported this purpose, this study. And a lot of them had proper formal qualification as well. And there was like 60% of them had technical roles. Now, technical roles were women who were using tools and technologies hands-on. I clubbed them as coming under technical roles. And those who were product managers, delivery managers, people managers, I clubbed them as being in a non-technical role. Now, the overall summary of the findings. So in organizations such as BNZ and most organizations, there's a great drive for gender balance, right? So they go out to universities for grad recruitment and they tend to strike a really good balance. They make sure there is gender balance met, tick mark, and they bring those graduates on board. And then what happens? A lot of the times you actually see a skew towards the end. Like you see those graduates be in technical roles in the junior and intermediate roles. But then when it comes to senior roles, they have dropped out. They have gone into people management roles, platform managers roles, or delivery manager roles. And then when you start looking at the lead roles, lead engineers, principal engineers, solution architects, or a tech lead, you see only women, predominantly women. And again, when it comes to roles such as infrastructure administration or security or networking, once again you see predominantly occupied by men. So we were just, then in the in-depth interviews that we had, it came out quite apparent that women thought that their managers or anyone who is mentoring them would slowly guide them towards the roles such as people management or product management roles. There is this inherent thinking process where they think, oh, women are quite good with managing several, like with displaying soft skills, right? And they just sort of probe women to get into the non-technical roles, away from the technical roles. And as a result, you see only men in those roles. And what happens is, a lot of the women, even those who aspire to get into technical roles, they struggle because they can't really have a mentor, because they can't see anyone like themselves in a technical role. Or they can't really go out much for a networking meeting. Because I remember going to a networking meeting which was organized by AWS last year, and it was quite interesting. It was like a group of about 105 people, and there were 3 of us women there. And we had a lab session and everything, and it was predominantly men who were sitting there. So mentorship gets affected. Networking becomes a problem because when we go out for networking, it just becomes more like a boys' club. Yes, a lot of the women might be able to relate to it. So the whole concept of inclusion, everything just falls apart. And then when it comes to career progression and stuff, a lot of women are compelled to rely on self-initiated learning. Once again, because they can't really rely on having a mentor to move on to technical roles. And that pretty much summarizes what I just spoke about. And when we looked at technical and non-technical roles, what are the challenges that women face? Microaggression came out as an obvious factor that has a strong impact on women working in technology. Now, microaggression is completely unintentional, but it is something that we just take it for granted. We have never taken it serious. It's not that the other gender are being completely vicious to actually attack women, but it is just that it's an unconscious, unintentional behavior which we have taken it for granted for many, many, many years. And it's just became so ingrained, right? And that has a strong impact on women. It's just that a lot of the times men don't realize how their behavior can have such a negative impact on women. And women in non-technical roles, too, they feel pressurized to display more of masculine-like behaviors. They are not actually feeling free to actually display their own personal traits. Because of how gendered this whole institution is, the technology sector, displaying masculine-like behavior is sort of expected. So these were the key findings. And then following the key findings, I decided, okay, let's actually explore this further. What is the research that is done? Is my display of confidence different to that of another man who would display confidence, right? So that's when I started looking at research work that was defined on confidence. The first one was quite interesting. A couple of academics did a research work in a Hong Kong university where they decided to look at the uptake of a new technology between male and female students. And it was noticed that a lot of female students displayed lack of confidence when learning a new technology, whereas male students were more open to learning new technology. And when they probed it even further, they realized that it was more socially constructed rather than the learner's ability to learn. And then there were other research work on self-efficacy of women, like how that has an impact when they get into a male-dominated environment, and a positive change can happen when they see someone like themselves in a senior role. But then that becomes a challenge, as we discussed, because you don't really see many senior technical women still in the industry working. And impact on self-confidence, and women inherently experience lack of support when they move away from what the society has decided that this is going to be their traditional way of behavior. And we all would have experienced it. And again, differential exposure to role models. So a lot of male students, as they get into the graduate roles, they can easily visualize and see themselves as being a lead engineer, as being a principal engineer, because they see people like themselves in those roles. Whereas with women, they just sort of think, okay, if I have to move into a different role, if I want to move into my career trajectory, it is going to be somewhere around the management side. And you see a complete underrepresentation of women in infrastructure, security, and networking side. And the last research, it was quite interesting about how a lot of the cultural and the structural inequalities are driving it, rather than, like, you can't just send women to a personal development course and expect everything to change. I think it is something that everyone in the room needs to acknowledge and accept that, hey, there is a structural inequality. How do we address it? Because it's a gendered institution, right? Now, organizational influence was even more interesting because, say, a male and a female employee are given a task to do, and a man would complete the task and he will have the confidence to actually go and say that I've done it and can have organizational influence. But with regards to women, it is expected for a woman to display more pro-social skills in addition to displaying the skills of being able to complete a job, which was quite interesting. And now when it comes to career opportunities, it just becomes way too difficult because of all the factors that I explained, moving into technical roles. And once again, how men react to being confident to women is completely different. Say, if a male has finished a job and then they get the confidence that they can complete other jobs based on what they have done. But with regards to women, women learn more, get confidence by vicarious learning. That is seeing others doing and doing it. But then that becomes a challenge because once again, who do you see and learn when it comes to senior technical roles, right? So practical implications. So we have decided, like, here are certain things. There was another interesting topic that I really need to talk about. There's a research that was done in HP. And there was an internal role and they encouraged more female and male employees to apply for that particular job. And when it came for job application, the females read the job description completely and they were ready to apply only if they met 100% of everything in the job description. Whereas with men, even if they met 60%, they were confident to apply for those jobs, right? And then when they encouraged women to actually negotiate salary, women negotiated 30% less than what they were actually ready to offer. So with all these studies, we decided, okay, a standard way of interviewing, a standard way of recruitment that we have for men will probably not apply for women, right? Because with the recruitment processes have all been decided ages ago, decades ago, where men were the real actual workforce, and now expecting that to work now when there are more female workforce coming into picture is just not fair, is it? So that's why we came up with some proposals. I'm very conscious about the time. So I'm just going to give you a brief gist about modifying the job descriptions, whereas we know how female candidates will apply. Rather than looking at what you need to meet, you can actually say, if these are the responsibilities that you currently have, then you are ready for your next role. That sort of gives them the encouragement to apply for jobs. Then understanding the gender dynamics. You cannot expect something that was designed ages ago to apply now for women. Making changes to it, understanding that there is mentorship gap, not being gender blind, but being gender conscious, understand how female candidates, how females work, how they display their confidence could be completely different to that of a man. And how to avoid a leaky pipe. Like, you can't just get the graduates and expect them to be in technical roles forever. They need constant mentoring. They need proper career pathways design. You can't just make an assumption that they're going to become a delivery manager or a people manager in few years' time. A clear career pathway into roles such as infrastructure, security, networking should be designed, and they need to be communicated in advance. Now, because there were so many more things that can be done in this study, I'm just currently working on setting up a non-profit organization within New Zealand called Tech Beyond Gender to expand this piece of work and to give more practical solutions to organizations to implement. And currently I'm working with Bank of New Zealand to implement some of those practical solutions in place to encourage more women to be or to retain the technical workforce pretty much. And here is my ending note. You cannot just ask someone to mimic a different behavior, and that can be completely uncomfortable. But in this current situation, that is exactly what we are doing. We are not encouraging women to display their personal traits or characteristics. We are actually expecting them to mimic a different behavior. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Meena, for that really lovely talk.